Lekan and his wife Ifoma had been through so much together. After years of being married and trying to conceive, their dream finally came true when Ifoma became pregnant before their fifth-year wedding anniversary. They were overjoyed, especially Lekon, who had been worried about his family's future. Before he got married, his mother had warned him about a ritual that his father's family performed to ensure the safety of any future children. It was a dark family secret that had haunted the family for years. Initially, Lekon had rejected the idea of performing any ritual. He did not believe in such things, and the thought of involving his unborn child made him uncomfortable. But as the months went by and Ifoma's belly grew, Lekon's mother became more insistent. She visited them in Lagos, speaking in hushed tones about the curse that would befall them if the ritual was not performed. Lekon did not want to listen, but the fear in his mother's eyes made him question everything. If you don't do this, she told him, you will lose her, Lekon. The curse will take her from you. The thought of losing Ifoma was unbearable. After a long discussion, Lekan and his wife decided to make the trip to his village. They planned to stay for just a couple of days, perform the ritual to fulfill all righteousness, allay his mother's fears, and return to their lives in Lagos. Before that day, Lekan's mother called to tell him to come on a particular day and that it is very important that they make it there that day. Lekan thought his mother was only trying to make them travel earlier because she missed him, so he agreed and moved his travel plans forward. It was finally the day for them to travel. The journey started well enough, but as evening approached, their car broke down on a lonely stretch of road at the entrance of the village. Lekan cursed under his breath as he tried to fix the engine. It was already dark, and the thought of leaving the car and walking miles in the dark was not appealing. When Ifoma spotted a small hotel sign in the distance, they decided to spend the night there and look for a mechanic in the morning. The hotel stood isolated on the edge of the village, a bungalow building with peeling paint and dim lights flickering in the windows. As they entered, they were greeted by a woman at the reception desk. She was smiling broadly and her eyes gleaming, making Ifoma uneasy. The woman introduced herself as Madam Adebisi, the hotel manager. You are just in time for dinner, she said. We have a special pepper soup for our guests. It's tradition. Everyone who stays with us enjoys a taste of our special pepper soup. The pepper soup was served almost immediately, steaming hot, with a rich, intoxicating aroma that filled the air. Lacon's mouth watered as the scent of spices and meat hit his senses. But Ifoma, already feeling worried, hesitated. Something was not right about this place, and the way the hotel manager kept hovering over them did not help. I don't think we should eat this, Ifoma whispered, her eyes darting around the room. Lacon waved her concerns away. It's just for one night, honey. We'll be out here soon. You need to relax. But Ifoma could not relax. That night, in their cramped room, she tossed and turned, plagued by nightmares. In her dreams, she saw herself tied to a post in the middle of a deserted street, her cries for help swallowed by the oppressive silence around her. Shadows danced around her, laughing, chanting in a language she did not understand. When she woke up, she was drenched in sweat. She kept staring at Lekon, who was snoring. Suddenly, she heard voices outside their door. She tiptoed to the door and pressed her ear against it, trying to make sense of what was happening. The voices were low and rough, like men who had spent their lives in the fields. They were talking about a sacrifice, a ritual that required the blood of a pregnant stranger to appease the spirits of the village. Her blood ran cold when she heard one of the men say, we will tie the man to the bed and take the pregnant woman. I hope they had the pepper soup because that is the only way they will be fast asleep. At that moment, Ifoma understood why the hotel manager wanted them to eat the pepper soup immediately. Ifoma recalled how Lekon poured the pepper soup inside his food flask, saving it for the next morning. She heaved a heavy sigh of relief, knowing he did not eat it. Ifoma's heart pounded in her chest. She ran to wake Lekon. shaking him until he opened his eyes. "We have to go now." Lekan, still half asleep, tried to brush her off, but the urgency in her voice finally broke through his drowsiness. He quickly sat up, fully awake now. "What is going on?" he asked, rubbing his hands on his eyes. "They are coming for us," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I heard them talking. We have to leave now." The sound of footsteps echoed outside their door. The men were coming closer. Lekan grabbed the room key from the table and motioned for Ifoma to follow him. They stood by the door, listening to the guards' voices as it grew louder. The door rattled as someone tried the handle, but Lekan had locked it from the inside. The men murmured and Lekan took the opportunity to pull Ifoma towards the back exit. They ran down a narrow alley and out into the night. After running for a while, they realized that they weren't alone. From the distance, they could see flickering torches and villagers moving in groups, searching the area. They ran towards the woods, Lekon holding Informer's hands, urging her to move faster. But she was pregnant, and every step seemed to drain her energy. The pain in her belly grew sharper with each passing moment. "I can't do this," she gasped. "Lekon, I can't run anymore." "We have to keep going," he insisted. "If we stop, they will find us." But Ifoma could not go any further. They stumbled upon a small cave nestled between the trees, and she collapsed inside, struggling to catch her breath. Lekon knelt beside her, fear gripping his heart. He could see the torches growing closer. They didn't have much time. "Go!" Ifoma whispered. "They want me, not you. I'm slowing you down. Please, Lekon, save yourself." "I am not leaving you," Lekon said, his voice firm. But as the torches drew nearer, he realized he had to do something fast. He told Ifoma to hide deep inside the cave while he would distract the group and send them far away from her. He kissed her forehead and promised he would return for her at dawn. Then, with a heavy heart, he ran towards the light and started screaming for them to get him. They began to chase him and he ran deep into the woods. But Lekon did not know where he was going. In his desperation to save his pregnant wife's life, he entered the forbidden forest, a place the villagers feared more than death itself. As he walked deeper into the forbidden forest, the trees seemed to close in around him, their twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching for his skin. The air grew thick with a suffocating heat, and strange noises filled the silence. Whispers, laughter, cries of pain. Lekon knew he was not alone in this forest. What he did not know is that something dark, ancient and malevolent was watching him. Back in the cave, Ifoma lay still, praying for Lekon's safety. But the night was far from over, and the evil lurking in the shadows was only just beginning to reveal itself. Ifoma sat alone in the cave, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts as she tried to calm herself. The night outside felt alive, buzzing with the sound of insects and the distant crackle of the villagers' torches. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from fear, but from the weight of her pregnancy. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping that Lekon would find his way back to her before it was too late. But deep down, she knew the danger they were in was unlike anything they had ever faced. Outside the cave, the darkness seemed to thicken, swallowing the moonlight that had once guided their way. Ifoma listened intently, every rustle of leaves sending a fresh wave of panic through her. She thought of Lekon running blindly into the forest. Where is he now? She wondered. The villagers who had been chasing Lekon had stopped at the edge of the forest. He heard their hesitation and their reluctance to enter, but Lekon had run deeper, unaware of the danger that awaited him. As Ifoma prayed, she felt a cold gust of wind blow through the cave, and she shivered. She placed her hand on her belly, trying to keep herself calm. Then something strange happened. Her unborn child moved violently, far more than usual. It was as if the baby could sense a dark presence. She knew something dark and malevolent was approaching. Ifoma felt a sharp pain and she let out a small gasp, clutching her belly. Then the silence was shattered by a sound that made her blood freeze. It was a low guttural growl, echoing from somewhere deep within the forest. It wasn't the sound of any animal she has ever heard before. It was more human, but distorted, like a voice warped by pain and rage. Ifoma's heart raced as she strained to listen, her pulse thudding in her ears. The growl grew louder and closer, followed by the sound of something large and heavy moving towards her. Her instinct screamed at her to hide or run, but where could she go? She was trapped in the cave, exhausted and unable to move quickly. Tears welled in her eyes as the terror gripped her. She closed her eyes and prayed for Lekan, prayed for herself, and most of all, prayed for the life of the child she carried. The growling stopped, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then, with a rush of air, a shadow darted at the entrance of the cave. Ifoma's eyes snapped open, and she stifled a scream. Standing at the entrance of the cave was a creature, a tall, gaunt man with eyes that gleamed like burning coals in the darkness. His skin was pale, almost sickly, stretched tight over his bones, and his lips were curled in a sneer that revealed sharp, pointed teeth. He wore tattered robes, stained with something dark, and in his hand he held a long, twisted staff, carved with strange symbols. Ifuma's body went rigid with fear. She had heard of spirits that haunted the forest, but she had never believed in them. Not until now. This creature, whatever it was, seemed to radiate a dark energy that pressed down on her like a physical weight. The figure stepped closer, his eyes fixed on her swollen belly. "I see you," he rasped, his voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "You carry life. You're not meant to be here." Ifoma could not speak. Her throat was dry and her body was paralyzed with fear. She could feel her baby kicking violently inside her, as if the child could sense the danger. The figure tilted its head, studying her with a cold, detached curiosity. "The village fears the forest," he said slowly, his voice echoing in the enclosed space of the cave. "They should fear what lies within it. But you are special. You do not belong here." He reached out with his long bony finger toward her, but before he could touch her, a flash of light erupted behind him, blinding Ifoma and the creature. The creature let out a hiss and recoiled, retreating into the shadows. Ifoma blinked as she tried to make sense of what just happened. Then she saw him, an old man with an air of authority that commanded respect. He stood at the entrance, holding a lantern that glowed with brightness. His face was wrinkled with age, but his eyes were sharp. "You should not be here." The old man turned to Ifoma, his gaze softening. "You must come with me now. You and the child are in great danger." Ifoma, still shaking, could barely speak. Who are you?" "I am the forest guardian," he replied. "I protect those who are lost in its depths. But you are not just lost. The child you carry is special. The spirits have sensed it and they will not stop until they have it." Ifoma's hand instinctively went to her belly. "What do you mean?" The old man stepped forward, offering his hand. "There is no time to explain. If you wish to live and if you wish to see your child to be born safely, you must trust me. Come, we must leave this place before the forest curse consumes you." Ifuma hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand. She had no other choice. With his help, she rose to her feet, wincing from the pain in her body. The old man led her out of the cave and into the darkness of the forest, the lantern's light guiding their way. As they moved deeper into the trees, Ifuma's mind raced with questions. What had the guardian meant about a child being special? And what was this curse that haunted the forest? But more than anything, she prayed that Lekon was still alive and that somehow they would find each other again before it was too late. Meanwhile, Lekon was lost in the depths of the forest, running through the undergrowth, branches scratching at his face and hands. He could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on him, slowing his steps as if the very air was thick with malice. The deeper he went, the stranger the forest became. The trees twisted unnaturally, their trunks bending at odd angles, and the ground beneath him seemed to pulse with a life of its own. But Lekan could not stop. He had to find a way out and to escape the nightmare that had swallowed him whole. Then in the darkness, he heard a voice. It was a faint one at first, but it grew louder as he ran towards it. Lekan, the voice called, soft and soothing. Lekan, come back to me. It was Ifoma's voice. He stopped dead in his tracks. How could she be here? Had she followed him into the forest? His heart leapt with hope, and without thinking, he turned in the direction of the voice, calling out a name. Ifoma, where are you? I am here, my love. The voice called again, closer now. But something was wrong. There was something off about the way she spoke. Lekan hesitated, his instinct screaming at him to stop. But the pull of her voice was too strong. He was desperate to find his wife, so he followed the sound deeper into the forest, unaware that something far more sinister was leading him astray. Lekan ran through the dark, twisted woods, his heart pounding in his chest as Ifoma's voice echoed in the distance, luring him deeper into the forest. The farther he went, the more disoriented he became, the trees closing in around him like prison bars. Something was wrong, and yet his love for his wife overpowered his sense of reason. He could not abandon her now. He pushed on even as the air grew colder and heavier with an unearthly presence. Suddenly, everything went silent. The voice calling his name stopped. The rustling of leaves, the distant cries of night creatures, all of it faded into a suffocating quiet. Lekan froze, his breath coming out in ragged gasps. The darkness seemed to press against him. And then without warning, something wrapped itself around his ankle. He barely had time to scream before he was yanked off his feet, dragged across the forest floor, and slammed against a large tree. A thick, sticky vine coiled around his body, binding him tightly to the trunk. He struggled, pulling at the restraints, but the more he fought, the tighter they became. Out of the shadows, the creatures emerged. They were twisted and deformed creatures with their faces hidden beneath the mask of bone and bark. Their eyes glowed like embers in the darkness, and their bodies moved with a fluid, unnatural grace. They circled Lekan, the guttural voices murmuring in a language he could not understand. Fear seized his heart, but he could not move nor speak. One of the creatures stepped forward, taller and more imposing than the rest. It had a crown of twisted branches on its head and long fingers with sharp claws. It tilted its head, studying Lekan with eyes that burned with an ancient hunger. Lekan trembled. He knew instantly what these creatures were. Forest spirits, ancient and malevolent. He had heard stories about them as a child from tales passed down through generations. These creatures fed on human flesh, particularly the wicked. They were the true cause of the forest. The leader of the creatures stepped closer, its breath hot and rancid against Lacon's face. It raised one long clawed hand and pressed it against Lacon's chest. Lacon's heart pounded, fear flooding his veins. The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing. It leaned in closer, sniffing the air around him. It clawed and traced around Lacon's chest, but instead of tearing into his flesh, it hovered just above his heart. The creature tilted its head again, almost in confusion. Pure, it whispered. The word was foreign and strange, yet Lacon understood it. The other creatures murmured among themselves, surprised and curious. The leader stepped back, retracting its claws, and with a sharp motion, the vines around Lacon loosened. He gasped as he fell to the ground, his body weak and shaken. He glanced up at the creatures, his mind spinning in disbelief. They had released him, but why? As if he knew what Lacon was thinking, the leader spoke again, his voice deep and echoing. We did not feast on the poor at heart. You are not for us. Lacon blinked in confusion, still trying to process what was happening. He had heard that the forest spirits haunted those with evil in their souls, those whose hearts were dark with greed, malice and cruelty. But he had never imagined they would spare him. The creatures gave him a pouch and they began to back away, melting into the shadows. Lacon did not understand what was happening. Their leader lingered for a moment longer, his glowing eyes fixed on Lekan. The forest has judged you. That is your gift. It whispered before turning and vanishing into the night. Lekan lay there for a moment, trying to catch his breath. The terror that had gripped him slowly began to fade, replaced by a sense of overwhelming relief. He had been spared. But why? Was it truly because of his heart? He didn't have time to think about it. He knew that he needed to get back to Ifoma. He opened the pouch and found the strange-looking figurine, but he doesn't know what to do with it. With great effort, he stood up and began making his way through the forest. The oppressive darkness seemed to lift, and soon he saw the faint light of dawn breaking through the trees and heaved a heavy sigh of relief. He stumbled towards the light until he left the woods behind him. In the distance, he saw the road where they had left their car. Relief washed over him as he spotted the vehicle in the early morning light. He quickened his pace, his body aching from the night ordeal, but the thought of finding Ifoma kept him going. As he approached the car, he saw her. Ifoma was standing beside the vehicle, looking tired but unharmed. Her face lit up with joy and relief when she saw him. Lekan, she cried, rushing towards him. She threw her arms around him, and for a moment they just held each other, grateful to be alive. I thought I lost you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I am here, Lekan said, holding her close. I am here. They both stood there for a moment longer, letting the reality of their survival sink in. Lekan could feel the weight of the night's event pressing down on him. But for now, all that mattered was that they were together and they were safe. They found a mechanic not far from where their car had broken down. The man walked quickly, and within a few hours the car was fixed and ready to go. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, Lekon and Ifoma got back into the car, eager to leave the village behind. As they drove away, Ifoma rested her head against the window, watching the countryside roll by. She thought about the old man who had saved her, the forest creatures, and the strange ordeal they had survived. Lekon was also lost in thought. The forest spirits had judged him, and somehow he had been spared. He could not shake the feeling that something bigger had been at play, something beyond his understanding. But as he looked over at Ifoma, her hand resting on her swollen belly, he knew one thing for sure. They had made it through the night and they still had the future ahead of them. As they continued their journey, they got to a roadblock. Ifoma was fast asleep, but she woke up as Lekon got out of the vehicle to check what was going on. Lekon's heartbeat increased as the forest surrounding the road went totally silent. He moved closer to the roadblock and found out he could move the logs. After moving the logs, he went back to the car but found out Ifoma was gone. He called out her name many times, but she was gone. Lekon was devastated. He screamed and screamed, but there was no response. He collapsed on the floor, not knowing what next to do. If you enjoyed the story and you need a continuation, please type continue in the comment section.